The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello and good afternoon. This is Corel Draw Production Tools for VersaCAMM users. I'm Steven Jackson with Imprintables Warehouse, and hopefully we're going to go over a whole bunch of great content for you guys today and show you different ways that you can use Corel Draw to maximize how you produce all your artwork and graphics for the VersaCAMM and VersaWorks, and show you some tips and tricks along the way. So hopefully we'll get a whole bunch out of this. We do have some questions, some poll type questions that we'll have come up here, and Nicole, if you can put the first one up for us. We'll try to run through all the poll questions first, just so I can get a little bit of demographics about everybody and understand who you are, what you are, and what you're doing, and kind of get a little level for you too. So the poll questions will be coming up in just a second. And the first one is, which model of VersaCAMM do you use? We're just, if you have multiple ones, pick the most advanced one you have. We've got the VS, VP, SP series, and other, because I know there's some people out there that have the XCs or other models, SolaJet or something like that. Or if you're a Mimaki or Muto user, you're still going to get some useful content from this webinar, and you can click on the other. So we'll give that a second to update for us. I see we've got an increase in people that have just jumped into the webinar too, so welcome to the webinar, and hope this is a great one for you. Looks like the biggest amount here is the VS series with 29%, VP running at 14%. Oh, I'm sorry, and the SP series is 43%. Now, in the shop that I work out of with my wife, we have a SP, a VP, and a VS series, and we like having all three, especially for the classes that we have. It lets us show the differences between them and also relate to each and every one of you out there with your specific printer. So if later on anybody has a question about any specific series, don't be afraid to ask. So we'll bring up the next poll question here. It'll take just a second. And are you currently using the VersaCAMM for signed products? This is to help me get an idea of what you're using the VersaCAMM for. In signed products, those projects tend to be a little bit different than the heat transfer projects in graphic-wise. You may be doing vehicle wraps, like we just had a vehicle wrap class this last weekend. The print end of things would be slightly different for that than it would be for just a full front t-shirt for heat transfer. So lets me know a little bit more about you. And 68% of you are using it for signed products, and it's one of the greatest features about the VersaCAMM is that you can use it for so many multiple areas. You'd be either doing signed products, I might be doing banners in the morning, and in the afternoon I'm doing heat transfer, and then later on that day I'm doing decals for something else, or printing up a car wrapper posters. Really is amazing, the versatility of it. Okay, and 20% don't have a printer yet, so those of you that don't have one, make sure you contact me afterwards and let me know what questions you have, and we'll be sure to help you out. Third poll question will be popping up here in a second. And are you using the VersaCAMM for heat transfer? So some of you that were using it for sign, you're also using it for heat transfer, and then this will let us know, kind of give me a better idea demographic-wise if you're using it for multiple areas, or you just might be a heat transfer only person or a sign only person, and it lets me understand what the typical user is out there. Those will be coming up in just a second here. And 69% of you are using it for the heat transfer also, and only 8% are saying no. So sounds like we need to help that 8% out to learn a little bit more about how the heat transfer can expand your business too. So one last poll question, and then we'll move on into the presentation. Just take a second here. And up to what level of training have you received on your printer? They're listed from the most basic to the most advanced, so please just select one at the highest level you're at. On-site installation would be when the installer came out and put your VersaCAMM together and showed you how to use it. Next after that would be a webinar similar to this one here. And then we have advanced off-site training like that provided through Imprintables Warehouse and myversacam.com, or other distributors have them. And then there's also advanced on-site training where you may have had a tech or an instructor or someone like myself come out and do a full day on-site training to help you guys tweak in different areas, color management or something like that. And it looks like those results are about to pop up here for us. And 69%, the highest level training was on-site, and 20% the webinar, which hopefully you'll be able to count this one after that. 9% of you come to advanced off-site training, and only 3% with the on-site training. So there are plenty of opportunities out there, not just web-based, but there's different on-site and off-site training that you can add to it. I'm a huge advocate of training, and it can always help you advance your business and learn what other areas and things you can get into. So we're going to look at Corel Draw and concentrate on how to make it work for you with your VersaCAMM. This first slide that comes up here is making a cut line. One of the number one questions that I get both through customers of mine, myversacam.com, even t-shirt forums and other forums I go to, is that they're having difficulty making a cut line around their graphic. In Corel Draw from X3 version on up to the newest one, X5, there's a feature that they've added in there that makes it very, very easy for us as Corel users and VersaCAMM users to be able to set up a cut line. We're going to show that, and then we're also going to dig into some issues with outlines and when you convert things to curves. A lot of people will use the three-step method, and then they'll have an issue with not getting the cut line where they wanted it because they've got an outline on their graphic and the cut line's trying to go in a different spot. Looking at some complex designs and bitmaps and how we work with cut lines on that. So we're going to switch over to Corel. Let me get to that. And once we hop into Corel, you'll see that I've got a Eagle's Pride logo here. It's got the eagle in the background, and I've got some text in front of it. And the pride there is just a simple text on it, and it's got an outline graphic to it. I've got this separated into a couple pages to show you some different stuff. So we're going to concentrate on this first one here. The Eagle's Pride that I've got in there, and I'll zoom in so we can see it full screen on that. We've got multiple objects in here. If I select on the eagle itself, that's an object, and I can move different pieces of it away. And what I want to do, though, is get a cut line around the whole outside of everything on this graphic. With Corel Draw from, like I said, X3 is where it started doing this all the way to X5. There's a very simple method that we can use in 3 mouse clicks to get a cut line around the outside of this. You may have to add a couple more pieces to it to get the interior portions, but it really is simple to do this. So what I'm going to do is, first we need to make sure that we're not all grouped together on objects in there. And you can see that on the objects here, you know, I've got the white on the inside there, I've got the gold for the beak right here. They're different objects. So this only works when they're different objects. I'll click outside of the area using my pick tool, which is this top one on the left-hand side, and I'll draw what they call a marquee box that surrounds everything that I want the cut line to go around. And when I let go of that, I can see that my weld and trim functions have opened up on the top. I've got combine, I've got weld, I've got trim, and all these different functions up there that I can work with when I have separate objects selected. But the last one, almost the last one down on the end here, this create boundary is the one we're looking for. So my first mouse click was where I dragged and selected all the objects. My second mouse click is going to be a left click on that create boundary. And what that's going to do is it creates a boundary that goes all the way around the selected objects there. And you can see the little outline and the nodes that it created there. So that was my second left click. My third click is going to be a right click on my cut contour color, which is necessary for VersaWorks so it knows where to cut. And when I right click on that, you'll see that the line is brought over to the cut contour color, and I'm going to zoom in on an area here so you can see it. And you'll see an issue right off the bat, but you can see the line that came around here, and that's my cut contour, and it went directly around it. But what happened here is where people start having an issue with things. You can see that around the S up here that it went to the center of that. And what happened with that is that lettering there, I'll zoom back out, and we'll delete that cut line for right now so we can address the issue that's there. This lettering here, if I look at it, I can see that it's got a uniform fill, it's that gold color, and then right down here you can see that it's got that RGB black that is an outline color. And what happens is that outline is a property of the object. It's a property of that lettering or graphic or whatever it is. And since it's a property of it, it's not an object itself. So when I try to draw that boundary that surrounds the objects, it's going to the objects, but not the outline. There's a very, very simple, easy fix for this one here. We've got that there. All I need to do with it is I can go to Arrange and Convert Outline to Object. There's a shortcut key you'll see at the right-hand side of that there, and I am a huge advocate of shortcut keys. Learn them and use them. It speeds up what you're doing. I can press Control, Shift, and Q at the same time, and it'll do exactly what it would do when I press this button. When I press that button, now that outline is an object. And another way I can demonstrate this and maybe give you guys a little better insight into what's going on is let's zoom into part of that. I'm going to hit Control-Z so it undoes what I had before, and it removes that effect there. And I'm going to go into and view it in wireframe. And when I look at this in wireframe, you notice that the outline, it went away because it's a property of that object. It's not its own object self. So we're going to do that same step that we did before where we did the Control, Shift, and Q, or I can go to Arrange and Convert Outline to Object. And you'll see all of a sudden now, you see where all that object was created on the screen there, and in wireframe mode, I can see the outline that I needed to get to so that I can create my cut line around it. So we'll go back and view this in the Enhanced, and I'm going to press F4 so I fill up the screen with my whole graphic. And this time now, when I draw a line around it, I'll do that three-step method again. Since that is an object, instead of a property of an object, it'll select around the outside of it. So I'll do one, left click, and drag around all the graphics. So I've got everything selected, the separate objects. I get my weld and trim functions, and most importantly, that one at the end up here, that's create boundary around the, create a new object that surrounds the selected objects. I left click on that, and it creates my boundary around there. And then I come over to my cut contour color and right click, and now I have a cut line that goes smoothly and perfectly around the whole design, everywhere where I wanted it to be. Now realize this is around the outside of the design. So one thing I need to go back and do, seeing is on the inside of the A here and inside the P and the R, D, inside the E right there, if I want it to cut in those areas, I have to go back and tell it to cut inside those areas by setting up a cut line. There's another simple trick to that one. Our first trick was a three-step cut line. I've got it around the outside. And now I'm going to use the Smart Fill tool. The Smart Fill tool is this one over here. It looks like a paint bucket, but when you hover over it, it says Smart Fill. We'll click on that one. And then it gives me the options up here where I can do a fill for it and my outline and tell it what I want it to do. I'm going to give it no fill, because I don't want anything on the inside there. And on the outline, I'm going to tell it to specify and a hairline. And I've got my cut contour color chosen already here. In Corel X5, they included the eyedropper in here so that you can click on that. You can go anywhere around the screen, and I could select this gold color here if I wanted it, or I can go over to my palette and select the cut contour color over there. So I'll select that one, and it's in there. In X3 and X4, when you did this drop-down menu, it didn't have the eyedropper. You would click on Other, and then you would go to your spot color library, and you would choose it from there. But we've already got it selected, so I'm not going to mess around with that. And now I'll zoom in so you can see what I'm doing. On the inside of these letters here with that Smart Fill tool, all I have to do is since that has a boundary all around the outside of it, I just left-click on the inside of there, and you can see it's quickly putting a cut line that goes right around to the boundaries in there. And I'll zoom in on that so you guys can see it a little bit better too. When I did the Smart Fill tool, it filled right in the inside of there with no fill, but it went to the boundaries on the outside and it gave me a cut line. So now I could go around my graphic, and I've got already the A up here is taken care of. I might want to put one on the inside of this S because it's closed off down there, so I can click inside there and inside the E here. And now this graphic is ready for me to send, export over in either a PDF or EPS, and send over to my VersaCAMM so I can print and cut it. So that's a fairly simple way that we can work with in setting up a cut line. The issues that people run into all the time, they'll do the three-step method, or there's other ways you can do it. You can take the whole graphic and copy it and weld them. There's many different ways to get this done, but one of the things that they run into a lot is with that lettering where they forgot that that's an outline on there, and that outline is a property of the object rather than an object itself. So it's difficult for it to put a cut line around it. It'll try to go to the center of it. This happens the most when people are doing athletic lettering, or they're doing 2 or 3 color lettering for sports jerseys or something like that. So this is a quick way, the 3-step method to getting a cut line around there. And sometimes when we've got the open areas on the interior of it, we have to go back with the Smart Fill tool. So the more complex the design, the more objects it has to calculate around. So say if this design had a whole bunch of different gradients all the way down on the inside of the eagle here on its feather colors in there, and there was maybe 1,000 objects because it was an EPS file that I imported in, and it calculated each one of those color gradients as a separate object. The more objects in there, the longer it's going to take for Corel to try to calculate the outline around it. So when we get into really complex graphics where there's all these different objects on the interior that don't matter, I could go around and remove all of those. I could copy this graphic and create another page within Corel. So I'll copy this, and I'll hit Control-C to copy it, and we'll add another page in Corel, and I can hit Control-V, and it's directly in the same exact spot as that one that is on page 1. So say if all this interior stuff, there was a ton of items in there, and I'll delete my cut line that's around here now so you can see the graphic as it would be before the 3-step. If there were too many in here that were causing me issues, I could simply go around and delete those objects, and making sure that the integrity of my exterior line is still there. I want to make sure that that is not interrupted in any way. So now I can still do the 1 click all the way around, 2nd click up here, create the boundary, and 3rd click, right click to put my cut line on there. And then if I were to take that cut line and hit Control-X or Control-C, come back to page 1 and Control-V, I would have that cut line there, and it would go in exactly the same spot. So where you get into really complex graphics that have a lot of different objects in there, a lot of nodes, and it's bogging down your system, and you see that not responding up at the top, depending on the speed of the system and what process you have, the easy way to do that one is to copy the whole thing, make another page, delete the interior stuff that doesn't really matter on it, and then create your outline around it and work with that there. So working with those complex designs can still be simple, but there's a few more steps to it. When we're working with something that has a bitmap in it, we'll go to page 4 here and grab this bitmap. I took the eagle before and I converted it over to a bitmap. So now if I go into my wireframe mode, we can see that there's a box around this, and it's actually pixelated, that is not a vector object in there. There's a number of different ways you can work with that. You could either do an auto trace on it, use my trace bitmap function, and do a quick outline trace, or I'll just tell it to do a quick trace on that. And it may come up with a acceptable cut line, and I can see the lines in here. Let's zoom in on this a little bit. It may be acceptable for what we're looking for. And I'll take this here and I'll ungroup. Oh, no. I can move the bitmap out of the way, and I can see the lines that were created around it. And this is a fairly simple graphic here, and this was fairly well defined. In this instance, if I'm using this for a cut line on there, I'm not concerned about the interior portions of it. So we'll lock that bitmap, and once the bitmap's locked, I can go in here to the vector graphic, and you see me moving it there. I'll put it back, and I can right-click on it and ungroup. And now I wouldn't be concerned necessarily about the interior portions and how accurate they are. I'm just looking at the exterior, and if I have something like right here where it's not very well rounded, or the tip isn't coming in and I want to be truly exact, I can come in and use my node edit tool. I can go in and grab a node and move it around and get that exactly where I want it on it. Typically, especially for the garment industry on things, I'm not going to be too terrible accurate with this, and I'll show you another trick in how you can work with this. If I have this graphic like that, and we'll go back to page 1 of it, and I need to switch my view back to enhanced, you can see on the outline of this entire graphic here, it's, except for the black up top, it is all the same color. It's that greenish color around the outside. So another thing that I could do in here is I could give it a bleed zone, which would make it a little bit nicer if I'm doing that bitmap for the eagle in there, and I can't get quite exact where I want to be. If I put a bleed zone around it and it's a little bit off, it's not going to matter at that point. So what I could do with that is I could take that portion of the graphic, or I could even take my cut line that's around this whole thing, and I can contour it out. I could take my contour tool, and we'll see if this graphic may be too small, but we'll give it a whirl to contour out. And there it goes. It did a contour out. I used the steps up here, and I told it to go out for the outside contour, and I gave it a space. I can even increase how far out that goes. And I might take this whole thing here, and on that contour out, either make it a black or a green fill on the inside of there, so it's identical to this portion here or that portion there. And if my cut is a little bit off or my accuracy is off on my VersaCAMM because I'm doing a really long run, it's not going to be as noticeable. So that's one thing I'll do with bitmaps a lot in order to be able to kind of mask where it may or may not hit it exactly. And a little bit later on in the webinar here, we're going to go into working with a bitmap to do a wall graphic or a fathead type graphic. So let's pop back over to the presentation. And that was making a cut line. We covered 3 steps, some of the issues with converting to curves and outlines and complex designs, and a little bit about bitmaps and working with those. The next thing I want to talk about is working with color. And in working with color in Corel or any graphic program really, especially for the VersaCAMM, it comes up a lot question-wise to me is RGB or CMYK. And people keep going back to the fact that the VersaCAMM is a CMYK printer. Yes, it is a CMYK printer, but the gamut or output, how many colors it can hit on the Roland VersaCAMMs is much wider than just a standard CMYK. It can hit into colors that are outside of the band of that because of the ink set that they use. With that in mind, it drives us to, if I just use the standard CMYK color mode when I'm doing all my graphics, I'm limiting the amount of colors that I can hit. And at the different trade shows online and other places, I'll be talking to people and they'll say, yeah, I love my printer, but I can't hit a really good red. I can't hit a really good blue. Well, if we design an RGB versus CMYK, we can hit outside of the standard CMYK area, and we can hit better reds and better blues and better greens, and we can hit some really punchy colors in there. We're also going to show you a way using the Roland spot color library that you can pick a specific color that is printed out from VersaWorks on the Roland spot color library, and we can hit that color, that exact color, every single time for our customers. And in conjunction with that is creating custom spot colors, working with the color styles docker, and then we're going to talk about special colors like perf, cut, contour, and variable data printing. So let's hop back over to Corel and take a look at some of this. We'll minimize that one. And I guess we could have used that one there for our demonstration on this. In RGB versus CMYK, one of the things to take a look at in your color management is I've got mine set up to ask me every time when I open a new file. So when I hit new, it's going to come up and ask me, do I want to be my primary color mode, do I want it in RGB, or I could set it for CMYK. That is under your options for Corel to have it come up and ask you that every time. In X5, it is a default that it comes up like that. I encourage everybody, you can even take a look down in the corner over here. I can see document color profiles. It's in RGB, Adobe RGB 1998, which is the widest gamut for RGB. And then for CMYK, if I do design something in there in CMYK, it's going to go with the single web offset printing version 2, which is the widest gamut for that one there. So this is where you want to design it for almost everything on the VersaCAMM is make sure you go with the RGB, because it's going to give you a wider color spectrum, and you're going to get better blacks, better reds, better blues, and have better production out of your printer. Now, if I wanted to work with the Roland spot color library, and you'll see I've got X5 open here, and you'll see on the side I've got several different color palettes. I've got my RGB palette open on the far side here, which is what I work with most of the time. And then I've got my Roland color palette here that I've Roland VersaWorks palette that I've created, and I've got this Roland VersaWorks color library. With X5 under the color palette manager, I can open that up by going to Window, Dockers, and then selecting the Color Palette Manager right down here. And you notice there's a checkbox next to it, and it's already open on my computer. With that open, you see these little almost like eye-looking items here, and that's in fact what it's supposed to be. I can click on that, and it'll open the eye, and you see my palette open up on the side over there. This is with X5, they integrated all of the Roland spot color libraries into here, so it made it very, very simple for us as VersaCAMM users to be able to use the Roland spot color library. For those that are still working with X3 and X4, you can still import those colors in and use them within Corel. There's a slightly different method for that. I'm not going to go over that today. I don't have X4 on this computer, but if anybody out there has X3 or X4, contact me after the webinar, and I will send you a PDF that walks you through exactly how to add those spot colors in there. And you'll be adding it to the custom spot color library that's in Corel X3 and X4. Some very specific ways to do it, but we're not going to cover that today. Please contact me afterwards, and I'll help you through it. So with X5 or X3 and X4, after you've added that in there, you'll have these spot colors in here. In VersaWorks, I'll bring that up real quick, we can create a color library chart to work from. And let me get over to, we'll go with the 540 that I don't have connected in right now, but I can still show you guys how to do this. What we would do to create that chart that we would use as a reference is we're going to first, in our AQ, I need to double click on that, and I need to go to the quality and change my color management to density control only. When working with the Roland color system library, it's very important that our color management, whenever we do the color chart, not after that, but the color chart itself, we use density control. And I have to set it in the Q properties, and I have to also in the Q properties tell it what media that I'm going to be printing on. So if I'm printing on, say, Quick Print, or I'm printing on Arlon 4560 GTX, which I think I've got that loaded in here. Maybe I'll come down, or I'm just using a glossy calendared vinyl. I'll click on the glossy calendared vinyl, and it'll set up the color chart using that glossy calendared vinyl and using the density control only, which is absolutely necessary when doing the chart, as that's how Roland controls the inks, limits, and everything else to keep the colors consistent. So we set this up in the queue before we even open up the color chart, and I'll show you why in just a second. I hit OK here, and then I come up to Media at the top of VersaWorks, and it gives me the color charts right here. Well, I want to go with color chart 1. That's my favorite one. It gives me all the different boxes, and I can see the colors when I print it out. And I'll click on OK. It gives me a little preview there and says, do you want this one to be the one you're going to print? I say OK. Now, once it's created that file for me, and I double click on it to get to the settings, if I go to quality, you'll see that everything's grayed out here. I can't change the media that it's going to or change the color management to density control like I normally would for doing prints. That's why we have to set it up in the Q properties before bringing it in here, because it actually sets everything for you prior to bringing it in there. You would simply, after you've got this set up, get your media width, normal process that you would for printing out anything, and you would print out this color chart. Well, the color chart down the sides of it, let me see if I can zoom in a little bit so you guys can see it. It has A, B, C, D, all these different letters here, and then PR, 0, 1, and all the numbers. And then down a little bit further on it, it has some other nomenclature on it telling you 100% yellow, etc. So with this color chart, we'll go back to Corel. You'll notice that the color library here for the Roland VersaWorks color library, it has that nomenclature RVW-PR. And let's, it kind of went out there. I'll pick something in here and I'll convert it to that. So we'll do the eagle beak right there, and we're going to convert it to this color. When I click on that, now you can see down below that's RVW, which stands for Roland VersaWorks, PR01K. If you remember on that chart, let's see if we can switch back over to that real quick, PR01K, so PR01 and then K would be that color right there. So now if I have that color chart and my customer's there with me, they can look at that color chart and say, that's the yellow that I want. I want everything to print out that exact yellow. I've got that color right there. I choose it in Corel using my color system library that's in X5 or with the one that you import in X3 and X4. I have the RVW PR01K that matches up identical with it. So now when I export this job, if I were to take this whole thing over and we'll export it, and I'm gonna we'll put it on the desktop real quick. We'll call it cut line demo and export. And then when I come over to VersaWorks, I'll hit cancel on this and we'll add that job in, add it to QA, and go to the desktop, and we're looking at cut line demo right there. I add this one in. You'll see under file format, it has the Roland VersaWorks colors right here, the spot colors that I had designated. In this one I designated earlier, and you can see the PR01K one that I designated in our demonstration just there. I do want to check this box that says convert spot colors, because now VersaWorks will convert that spot color, that RVW, PR, whatever number that we have there, over so it will print identical to the color that was on that chart. So this is how we use Corel Draw in conjunction with VersaWorks to do exact color matching for our customers. When they come in, they say they want a certain red, you can pull out that chart, they can pick their red off of it, you take that number from there and you integrate it into your design, you export it out with the spot color in there, bring it into VersaWorks, and that color will print out exactly the same every single time. It's a great color management tool. It is, in my opinion, underutilized out there. More and more in everyday printing that I do, I'm finding that I'm going back to the chart. I printed out a big one and mounted it in our shop, and it's becoming very useful to us. So that is a great way that we can use the Roland Spot Color Library and keep our colors consistent and make sure that we get the right output. With that, we'll look at creating some custom spot colors. If you haven't created a cut line color, or you're trying to create a perf cut contour, because the machine can also do a perforated cut for us, which is a great feature, we need to create that color within Corel so it has the right naming to it. Every one of them for cut contour, it's capital C, UT, capital C, O, N, T, O, U, R, and it's all one word. To add these spot colors in there so that when we export it from Corel, it still retains as a spot color and it comes into VersaWorks, and VersaWorks will see those spot colors with that naming to it, not as a color, but rather a command to do something, a command to cut, a command to do a perforated cut, a command to use metallic ink or white ink or whatever we have on there for the VS users out there. What we need to do is we can go to our palette editor, so Tools and Palette Editor, and I can pick the palette. Maybe I've got, in my palettes, I've got a Roland VersaWorks or spot colors, or I can even create a new one. I can name one, and I'll name this one Corel Webinar. And we'll save this new palette, and now there's no colors in there, but I can choose and make my own colors. So if I want to add a color, I can create that pinkish color that most people will use as the cut contour, and I pick my color from in here, and it can be CMYK, RGB, it doesn't matter for this portion of it. I'll click on Add to Palette, and then hit OK. And there's my color in there right there. I want to name it whatever function I'm going to have this doing, whether it be cut contour, perf cut contour, variable data printing, whatever I want it to. So on this one, we'll make it cut contour, capital C, U-T, C-O-N, T-O-U-R. And very important on this one here is in X5, it has a treat as down here. In X3 and X4, you can't create a new palette in X3 and X4. You have to use the custom spot colors palette and add colors to that. And that PDF that I was talking about earlier kind of leads you through that. So, but very importantly in X5, now it allows us to make it a spot color, and you can always tell a spot color because it's got that little spot right in the corner of it down there and right in the corner of it right here. And that indicates that it's a spot color, and Corel will treat it that way. When I click on OK, notice it's not over here yet because of my color palette manager. I haven't opened that one up. So I open this one up, and there's my cut contour, my new color that I created, and I can use that within my design to be able to designate where a cut's going to go, or a perforated cut, or any other function that the VersaCAMM can do. So that's how we create our custom spot colors and add them to the palettes. And the same thing would go with when we're doing variable data printing or anything like that, which we're going to get to in just a little bit here and show you guys how to set up some variable data printing fields. So that's creating our custom spot colors. The next thing I want to show you guys is the color styles Docker. I'm going to close a couple of these here. I don't need the VersaWorks or Webinar one. I'll use the VersaWorks. There we go. I got rid of some of my palettes over there so I can open it up a little bit. The color styles palette, color styles Docker over here. Again, any one of these Dockers, it's window, Dockers, and then you choose the Docker that you want out of this. With that Docker over there, I can look at this design and maybe I want to change all of this gold up here over to a different color, or I want to go across my whole design and make sure that my black is truly the black color that I want to print. And instead of going through the whole thing by the object manager and trying to select on down through or randomly just selecting items, I can use my color styles Docker over here. It's a great tool. I will select everything that I want here. I'll grab all of that and I simply drag the whole thing over and drop it into that color styles. And you'll see now with the file that I have here, the cut line demo, here's all of my colors that have come up. And I can quickly look at this and I see right off the bat there's a CMYK black that's in here. And that CMYK black and this other black that are here are going to print differently. They have different values to them. And remember we talked about using RGB versus CMYK. A black CMYK color, unless I do a real rich black, which this one is a pretty rich black with a 75, 68, 67, and 90, it will print out fairly good as a black, but it also uses a lot of ink. With this other black here, that's an RGB black, and it's going to be using the RGB values. If I can go over here, I can see that 000 for an RGB black. I'm going to get a deeper, richer black than I would unless I'm using a really rich CMYK one. But I can take this CMYK one now, and I can right-click on it, and I can edit that color. And we'll just mess around with this a little bit. We're going to choose an entirely different color so you can see it update on the screen across it. And maybe I'll pick this blue right here, and I want to change it to that blue. So we'll hit OK. And what did I edit color? And we've got the blue right here. And I'm making a mistake here somewhere. Oh, I think I have the whole thing still selected. That's why it was doing that. Let's edit that color now and pick a blue. And it should let me change it. Of course, now it's not going to. Swap colors. Let's try this one here. I'm doing something wrong. I apologize for that. And go with this guy. Edit color. There we go. Change it to the blue because I'm working in that one there. It may have had that portion locked, or it was on a different page within this design probably. So now I'm on the page that I need to work with. I've got it to the blue. And when I hit OK, you'll see in the design there it changed everything over to that. So my mistake there was I had different pages in the whole design, and I was, if I go down to those other pages, I'll be able to edit them there, but I was working on this first page. So I should have selected that one there. So you can see how I could change all that. And if I had multiple objects within my entire design, that I could change all of those objects at the same time because they're all the same color. And I can quickly go through my entire design and figure out where my colors need to be and convert them over. So I like using the color styles Docker quite a bit. It speeds things up for me. Unfortunately, in this graphic, I kind of fooled myself because I have lots of pages. You can see where I changed them over on these other pages, and I made the mistake by trying to change those colors over. So you can see even the guys who use this all the time make mistakes. So that's the color styles Docker, and you get familiar with it. It can speed things up for you. It's a great, great tool out there. With special colors like Perf Cut Contour, we talked about how to add them in there, but let's talk about variable data printing a little bit. So we'll get into another graphic here I have that has some variable data printing fields, very similar to the other graphic that you just saw, but with variable data printing, what it allows me to do is I can make these fields within my graphic, and you can see I've got my cut line all the way around this here. I've got the Eagle's Pride, and then I have these other boxes in here. And this box in here, if you take a look at it, you can see it's VDP underscore player name. This box over here is VDP underscore player number. Now, in my palette that I have over here, I had already added those. No, I don't have them added into this one, so I could add them into that whole palette by simply going to Tools, Palette Editor, and I'll select the one I have in here, the Roland VersaWorks one, and I can add a color to this. And on this one, I'll use my pick tool, eyedropper, because I've already got that in there. And I'll pick that color there and add it to my palette and hit OK. And then this one here, I could rename it to that VDP_player number. So we'll do that real quick. The VDP stands for variable data printing underscore, and then the player number, player name, whatever it is, you can have that portion of it be whatever you want. It could be Corel webinar names. It could be barcode numbers, whatever you want it to be, because that's going to correspond to a field in an Excel spreadsheet where you will put the data in that you want to use in this design. But it's important for us to understand how to add those names and numbers, and we'll call this Corel webinar. So you can see in the demonstration here. And I need to make sure I keep that consistent. Corel webinar, all one word in there, and I need to, when I use my Excel spreadsheet, make sure I use that same exact setup there. So we'll hit OK on that. Oh, and I made a mistake on that. So I need to edit my palette. I'll go over to Tools, Palette Editor, and on that color there, the mistake that I made is it says it's a process color. So now, as a process color, when we bring that into VersaWorks, it'll print it. It doesn't see it as a command. It needs to be a spot color. So I'll do the drop down, I'll change it over to a spot color, and I'll hit OK. And now with this box here that I've got, I can go over and I can right click, and now it's 100% VDP, variable data printing, Corel webinar. So we'll take this entire design here and we'll export this one, and we'll just Eagles Pride VDP, we'll put that on the desktop there. And in VersaWorks, when I open this one up, we'll hit cancel on this last job we had there. We'll add that into the QA, and it was Eagles Pride VDP. And you'll notice that there's a new field in here. It's got a normal cut in there, and this little field here shows that it has variable data information in it. So I've got that there. Now I need to open up, and we'll go to, need to open up an Excel spreadsheet. And in this Excel spreadsheet, I can name anything that I want in there. I can make the top of it here. Remember, I had to use the same nomenclature that I had in the other place. So we'll use VDP underscore Corel webinar, and then make this a little bit bigger here, this column, so it doesn't mess it up. And then this one here, we'll call it VDP underscore player name, because I know that's what the other field in there was, and that graphic that was in Corel. So I could type in a whole bunch of names in here, and do Nicole, Irv, Jen. We've got a few names in there, and the webinars, we can put a name or any type of text information in there. So we'll do just numbers in here so that we can see how this works in VersaWorks itself once we bring it over. Oops, I'm holding the one down a little bit too much there. 1.5, and we'll make this one 1.4. I got a little out of hand there. Now that I've got this set up, the top of the column has the name that corresponds with the field. Remember our fields here, we've got the VDP underscore Corel webinar, and on this one I've got VDP underscore player name. So it corresponds with those, and now I will save this as a CSV, which is a comma separated value book. So we'll put this down. I want to go to CSV, comma delimited, and we'll put that on the desktop, and we're going to call this Corel webinar, just so I can find it. We click save on that one there, and it's going to tell me that multiple books don't work with CSV, so it's going to make it into just one. That's fine, and I want to keep it as a CSV format. Let's get rid of that screen real quick, and now when we go back over to VersaWorks, I've got the job right here. I double-click for my settings, and when I come all the way down to variable data now, a field that a lot of people aren't using and is a very powerful field, I have the ability to click on this box up here for Enable Variable Data Printing. When I click on that one, now it allows me to pick a file, which I'm going to pick a file. I'm going to open it up, and we have that Corel webinar on the desktop. So we double click on that, and you can see the player name and the Corel webinar area. I've got the name and the number exactly as we entered into that spreadsheet. And I can take this here and I can change the font size. Let's make that like a 120, see if that fits a bit better. That does a lot better in this whole column here, or I can do a single one, which would just affect this particular one there. But I'll do the whole column, and we'll make this 120. And I'm not going to get too depth in this, but I want to show you the end result of all this. And you can change your fonts and all sorts of stuff in there. Now remember, in the first, when we go to layout on here, it didn't have all of, it just had one in there. When I go back to layout, you can see I've got each individual one set up. It's got the name and the number corresponding with the list, and they're all generated for me. So this can really speed things up for when I need to do player names and numbers or something like that, and be able to do this very quickly for it. So that's a quick overview of that. And I am running a little bit behind on time here. Oops. We'll get back over to this. So that is special colors, perf cut, contour, variable data printing, and all that. For wall graphics and bitmap work, which is our next slide here, variable data, we already talked about that. Actually, on some of the limitations that I wanted to talk about here, I'll show you real quick in Corel. The biggest limitation that you're going to have is it has to be a rectangle or a square. You can't do an arched or a curved object. We had somebody that was asking just recently if you can flip text. You don't have that ability in variable data printing, so it is a little bit limited on that. So that's one of the limitations of it. So we'll go back to the PowerPoint and to wall graphics and bitmap work. The main thing that I wanted to show here, I get a lot of questions from people about how do I set up a wall graphic. And I want to do something similar to the Fatheads or the Wall Hogs or these different brand names that are out there. I want to be able to create these for my customers. So I've got my friend Irv here. He's all set right there, but I'm actually going to extract it so you can see that is the photograph that I started out with, and I'm going to make a wall graphic out of this. And the easy way to do this, I do have another video out on the internet that walks through this exact one here, so you can go look at that afterwards. The easiest way I have found to do this is to simply draw a line around it using the Bezier tool. And the Bezier tool is one of my favorite tools in Corel. Very simple to work with. I'll go use that, and first off, oops, I forgot I need to lock my picture, and I'm going to lock that object, so that when I'm doing things inside of here, I'm not affecting that picture anymore and not moving it around. Then we'll go to our Bezier tool, and I'll zoom in to get a starting point. And I simply take the Bezier tool, and I use it to draw around. I'm going to draw around this and make a couple spots. And I can go back after the fact, once I've got this whole object around him, and I'm going to go real choppy on this just because we're pressed for time on this, and we're not going to go in depth on it. And we'll just do Irv's head right now so that you guys can see how this works. And we'll go around. I need to swing down just a little bit. We'll go around, and then I'm going to connect it so that now you see it filled in there. That tells me it's a closed object, and that's what we're looking for, is a closed object. And I'll give it no fill, and I'll right-click on it and make it my cut line. And now, when I take Irv here, this picture, I'll unlock that object. And I take that picture there, and I go to Effects, Power Clip, and place it inside Container, and designate that container, and get rid of this line here. And now I have that custom wall graphic. And of course, I'd go around and edit my nodes, take this one up here, and maybe remove that, and then click on this here, and right-click, and I'm going to make this a curve. And once I've got it to a curve, I can smooth it out and make it where it looks more realistic. But this is the easiest way I have found to make a wall graphic, or where I'm trying to clip in a bitmap or something like that. I've seen all sorts of different ways people are doing it out there. They're trying to do auto traces and taking the results from that and deleting portion of it and everything. I can pretty much, once you get comfortable with the Bezier tool in Corel, you can pretty much draw all the way around a graphic in 15, 20 minutes, somewhere in there, and you'll get faster as time goes on. You'll get more comfortable with the controls. And once you have it around there and it's a closed object, you simply power clip it in, smooth out your points and where you want it, and now you have something that I can export and send right to my printer for print and cut. Very easy and simple way to do it. And like I said, there is a longer video of this one out there. It's on myversacam.com that you can watch. It shows exactly how I made that full IRV fathead graphic type object and then send it out and print it. And in the class, the hands-on class that we run the past few times, we've actually applied this IRV graphic onto the wall, and it's a lot of fun. We have fun with it. So that would be a quick overview of how to set up a wall graphic and just a quick tip or trick and how to make things easier for you when you're doing that. Power clip, you can use that for not just an object like that. I could power clip into a text. So I could take IRV out of here. We'll extract the contents. And I could write a text over here. And we'll do a real big IRV. Change that to a fat text, something like a Stahl's Varsity. And I know this isn't going to quite look right because of where everything falls on it. But you can power clip into any type of object. Now I've got the photograph selected. I'll again go to Effects. I'll go to Power Clip, Place Inside Container. And the container I'm designating is the IRV that's right there. And we'll delete this there. And you can see how you can do some very neat effects. Say I had a campground that I was doing a graphic for some sweatshirts, and they had some beautiful pictures of the mountain range that's in the back of the campground, and they wanted Colorado camping on it, and they wanted their campground clipped into that lettering. I can do a custom effect with Corel and my VersaCAMM now that you can't recreate hardly any other way. Maybe sublimation or something like that, but getting a true photographic print on the inside of something that's going on a shirt like that, very, very cool effect and something that we can do simply in Corel and VersaWorks. So that is a little bit about working with bitmaps and the power clip tool. The next thing on our list here, and I get this question a lot, is people are asking about working with EPS versus PDF, effects, flattening the image, and working with that in there. We got into some file size restrictions when we taught the wrap class this weekend and showed how VersaWorks, if I'm sending it a 700 megabyte file for it to print out, it's going to bog down, and it has a high potential for it crashing in there. So we have to keep thinking about file size when we're doing all of this too. So really, EPS versus PDF, working with effects, flattening the image. Let's take a look at it in Corel now. When we get into Corel here, I've got that same Eagle's Pride, but I created another graphic in here. It says runs deep, and I simply use the drop shadow tool over there. So I can go back over to my tools here, and all the way down the end I've got my blend, contour, and all that, and I can use the drop shadow. And this one already has a drop shadow with it. I can adjust it there. Again, remember, your drop shadow that you have here, it is not an object. If I go here and I go to View and I look at Simple Wireframe, that drop shadow is gone. It is not its own object. So what I can do is I can change that over and make this whole thing a flattened graphic. Now, this drop shadow is a tough one to put a cut line around. I could possibly bring it in a lot closer and then use my same cut line that I had before around the entire thing, one of those tricks, doing around, and contour out and everything, however you set your cut line up on that. And what I need to do with the whole graphic, because when I export from Corel as an encapsulated PostScript or an EPS, all of those effects, the transparency, the drop shadow, bevel, all these effects which are properties of an object, it tries to calculate them back over. So when we bring it into VersaWorks, VersaWorks can sometimes get confused with them. And I'll get the phone calls from somebody saying, I'm trying to print out this graphic. It's coming up with a white blank area in the middle of it that isn't showing anything, but that's where my drop shadow is. What I'll tell them to do is flatten the image. And what we mean by flatten the image is we take this portion of it here, or whichever. You could take the entire image, however you want to do it. And it's important to do this at actual print size because of the DPI that you're going to have and what you're going to be printing out of the printer, DPI or pixels per inch. Once I've selected it there to flatten it, I simply go to bitmap and convert it to a bitmap. I can choose what resolution I'm going to do it at. The industry standard is 72 pixels per inch, or as you'll see here, dots per inch, which is a little misleading. That's at viewable distance at about 6 feet. So we'll do 150 for this one right here. I can tell it a transparent background, and we'll hit OK. And now that whole thing, when I go back to my wireframe, I can see now it's a bitmap in there. So if I had my cut line around that before, I would want to maintain the cut line in a separate vector object. So when I go back and I send all of this to VersaWorks, the cut line is still a vector object, it's still a spot color, and it will remain on top of it. So I'm only going to convert over the items that are necessary for me so that it's not a effect, it's not a property of that object anymore, and VersaWorks can correctly see what's going on and correctly print it out for us. I found a lot of times in the conversation of EPS versus PDF that when I get into the larger file sizes and working with these types of effects, that the PDF files tend to work a little bit better in VersaWorks. So if you're working with an EPS file and it's giving you issues and you've done the flattening and it's still giving you issues, you can try save as, which it's not an export function in Corel. You go to File and then Publish to PDF, and you can do it that way. PDFs can retain both vector and raster data, so you can have that bitmap, that TIFF, JPEG, and all the vector data, and it will come over into VersaWorks correctly. So if you're having an issue with that, try the different export ways and see which one works best for you. So that kind of covers real quickly EPS versus PDF, working with some of the effects like drop, shadow, transparencies, flattening the image, and last on this list here is the file size issue. Say I'm working on that vehicle wrap that we were doing this last weekend. The problem you have is, remember I said we wanted a 72 pixels per inch at our print size. So when we do that, I've got these files that one side of the car was 200 inches long by 83 inches tall, and we needed to have that all at 72 pixels per inch, which ended up with file sizes of around 800, 900 megabytes, which are just huge files, and takes forever to process it and run it and everything. And you're running the risk of VersaWorks crashing when you do that. So what you can do with that whole thing is, if this was my entire image here, I could take this entire thing and we'll convert it all to a bitmap just to get it as one flat image here. And now it's all a bitmap there. What I can do is take this down to 1/5 of the size simply by coming up to my bar up here in my scale factor and do 2, 0. And I've got it locked, so they're both going to do the same. And now when I export this, I can look at that and remember it was 150 pixels per inch, and now it's 1441 by 744, or a resolution of 750 by 750. It's a higher pixels per inch in there, but it's going to come out as a smaller file size when I bring it out and I take it into VersaWorks. And it's easier for me in VersaWorks now just to expand it out to where it's going to be the correct size by just multiplying it by 5. So in VersaWorks, I would have this file there and go into my settings for it, and under my layout, I can simply go into scale and click in 500, and now it's resized perfectly with the 1/5 scale that I had before. So when I'm working with those larger file sizes, you want to make sure that you reduce it down and let VersaWorks do some of the work on that so that we're not bogging down the system too much. So hopefully that'll help some of you out there with the EPS and PDF file problems and the file size problems, and clear up some of the issues you've had. So let's go back over to our presentation, and we're on to the last slide. Real quick, I don't want to just touch, this video that you're watching today is going to be posted, so I know I went fast on a lot of areas, especially in the end because I was running a little short on time. So please go back and take a look at that. Send me any questions you guys have. I try my best to respond to everybody and make sure that I answer your questions to the best of my ability, and if I don't know the answer, I'll do my best to find the answer for you. If you have video ideas, not just for Great Garment Graphics, but something else that we can put on my VersaCAMM or other places, send me your ideas. If you want to see a more in-depth one on the spot color library, I can do that and post it up there. And we are looking to put more Corel Draw tutorials on myversacam.com. Don't forget that Imprintables has off-site and on-site training available. We do the VersaCAMM workshop. Some people call it boot camp, a 2-day class, and we have the wrap classes. So if you're interested in any of that for much more in-depth training, please let me know on that also. I think I've got a couple minutes left, Nicole. And maybe we can hit a hot question or two.
Okay, see, we actually don't have a lot. We did have a lot of comments saying how great the presentation was, but we do have one. They want to know what is typically used. Is it ESP or PDF? And what is the advantage of using the ESP?
The EPS.
I'm sorry, EPS, yes. Mm-hmm.
There's all sorts of debate back and forth. I used to use EPSs all the time. That was all I ever used to encapsulate PostScript. And over the past probably 6 months to a year, I've started using PDFs about 30% versus 70% of the time. Encapsulated PostScript, if you don't have any of those effects and everything, it tends to be a smaller file size. The PDFs tend to handle the effects of drop shadows and the bevels and things like that, transparencies. They tend to handle that a little bit better. So if you're working with a lot of those effects and you haven't flattened it, or you're trying to send it without flattening it because you want to retain very precise and crisp and clear graphic on that, and you're afraid of inflating the graphic and having it get too pixelated, try the PDF first. It tends to be a little bit smoother when it's working with those effects and things like that. So the bottom line is try both. See which one works best for you. So hopefully that answered the question.
Okay, thanks, Steve. We do have another one.
Any other hot topics?
Yes, we do have another one. They
Okay.
said, what is the difference between publishing to PDF and exporting a PDF?
In Corel, there is no export to PDF function. In fact, that somebody the other day was trying desperately to get to a PDF and was getting frustrated, and I showed them where it was in Corel, and they'd been using Corel for a few years and had never seen that spot on the publish to PDF. So publish to PDF is the same as an export function, but if you go in export function in Corel, you will not find the PDF option on there. The only way to do it is through the publish function. And I don't know why Corel named it that way or changed it over. Maybe because PDF is owned by Adobe, and they were kind of forced to put that in there a different spot. That's just a guess, though.
Okay, that looks like all the questions that we have.
Okay. If you guys have questions afterwards, or there was a question that we didn't hit on here, we'll take it to the list and see if I can respond to everyone. Again, thank you for coming by for the Corel webinar for VersaCAMM users. Stephen Jackson, sales rep, technician, and trainer from Imprintables Warehouse. You can always find us on the web at imprintables.com. Call us direct at 800-347-0068. You can catch me directly at my desk at 518-630-6655. And my email's at the bottom there, Stephen@imprintables.com. I really appreciate everyone coming out and spending the time with me today. Thanks for stopping by.